My name isn't the one people call me. It hasn't been for a long time. For 20 years, I've answered to a name that doesn't belong to me. I've built a career, a routine, and a quiet reputation using an identity that isn't mine. The man everyone knows never existed. And the man I really am, disappeared a long time ago. I didn't steal a name for money. I didn't steal it for power. I stole it to survive. My real name used to be Andrew. I was 26 when my life collapsed. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way. No explosions. No police sirens. Just a series of bad choices, quiet failures, and a moment when fear became stronger than responsibility. I worked at a logistics company back then. Paperwork, shipments, signatures that people trusted without thinking. One mistake, a missing document, a rushed approval led to a financial disaster for a small supplier. They lost everything. The investigation came quickly. I was young, scared, and completely unprepared for consequences. My name was on the forms. My signature was on the mistake. I wasn't a criminal. But I wasn't innocent either. When the pressure grew, I panicked. Instead of facing what I had done, I ran. Not physically at first. Emotionally. I stopped answering calls. Stopped opening emails. Stopped showing up. Then, one night, I packed a bag and left the city. No goodbye. No explanation. No courage. Just fear. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I couldn't stay where I was. My life had become a place I didn't recognize anymore. A few days later, in a small town near the coast, I met a man in a bar who looked tired, quiet, and broken in a way I recognized. His name was Daniel. We talked about nothing important. Weather. Work. Silence. He drank too much. I drank with him. Near midnight, he collapsed outside the bar. Heart failure. Just like that. The ambulance arrived too late. His wallet lay on the ground, open. ID card inside. No family contacts. No emergency numbers. Just a name. A life. A chance. I stood there longer than I should have. People think identity theft is about crime. Sometimes, it's about escape. I took his ID. Not to steal his money. Not to steal his past. To erase mine. Daniel had no criminal record. No attachments. No unfinished disasters waiting for him. Andrew did. So Andrew disappeared. And Daniel was born. At first, it felt unreal. Saying another name. Signing another signature. Watching people believe I was someone else. But survival doesn't care about authenticity. It only cares about continuation. I found work. Simple jobs. New routines. A quiet life built on borrowed information. No one questioned me. People rarely do. Years passed. Daniel became real. Andrew became a memory I avoided. I didn't contact my family. Not because I didn't love them, but because explaining who I had become felt impossible. How do you tell people you erased yourself? How do you admit you chose disappearance over responsibility? I told myself I was protecting them. The truth was simpler. I was protecting myself. The new life was quiet. Predictable. Safe. But safety without truth feels hollow. Every time someone said my name, something inside me tensed. Because it wasn't mine. Because it never would be. At night, I sometimes dreamed of my old apartment, my old desk, my old mistakes waiting for me like unpaid debts. I always woke up before I could face them. People think running solves things. It doesn't. It postpones them. I wasn't haunted by what I had done. I was haunted by who I refused to be. Years later, I built a reputation as a reliable man. Calm. Responsible. Trustworthy. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had become everything Andrew wasn't. But I wasn't Daniel either. I was just someone living in between. No past. No truth. No identity that felt real. One evening, a coworker asked me, "So, where are you really from?" The question felt harmless. But my chest tightened. "Somewhere far," I replied. "Not geographically. Emotionally. Because the place I came from no longer existed. And the man who lived there was gone." I started writing this confession because pretending has become heavier than the truth. Because living under another man's name for 20 years doesn't make you free. It makes you invisible. To others. And eventually, to yourself. Living as Daniel for 20 years didn't feel like a disguise. It felt like erosion. At first, I was careful. Every document, every conversation, every small detail mattered. I memorized the information on his ID like it was my own childhood story. His birth date. His hometown. His empty past. But after a while, the fear faded. And what replaced it wasn't peace. It was numbness. People around me believed in Daniel because I believed in him enough to stop questioning it. I went to work, paid my bills, smiled at neighbors, lived inside a life that felt functional but hollow. No one noticed the absence of a real history. Most people don't look that closely. They see what fits. I avoided long friendships. Avoided deep conversations. Avoided anything that required emotional consistency. If you never tell your story, no one can find the cracks in it. But the cracks were inside me. Every birthday felt wrong. Every form felt artificial. Every introduction felt like a performance. "Nice to meet you, Daniel." The name still felt like it belonged to a ghost. At night, when the city was quiet, Andrew returned. Not as a memory. As a question. "Who are you really?" I didn't have an answer. The worst part wasn't the fear of being discovered. It was the fear of being known. Because if someone truly knew me, they would see that I wasn't living a life. I was hiding inside one. I tried to build meaning. Tried to care about routines, promotions, weekend plans. But meaning built on a life feels fragile. Like glass. One mistake and everything shatters. I dated occasionally. Nothing serious. Emotional distance became my safety net. People want stories. I only had silence. One woman once asked, "Why do you never talk about your childhood?" I smiled. Nothing interesting. The truth was darker. My childhood was real. My present wasn't. Every connection I avoided made my life safer. And emptier. Years passed without dramatic events. No police. No investigations. No confrontations. Just quiet avoidance. But the past doesn't need to chase you. It waits. One evening, I received a letter at my apartment. Not addressed to Daniel. To Andrew. My real name. My hands froze. The envelope was old-fashioned. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a short message. "Your mother has been asking about you. She deserves to know if you're alive." No signature. No threat. Just truth. My chest tightened. For 20 years, I had avoided my family not because I didn't love them but because explaining my disappearance felt impossible. How do you tell your mother you erased yourself? How do you explain that fear became your identity? I sat on the floor holding that letter for a long time. The room felt smaller. Not physically. Emotionally. The walls felt closer. The silence heavier. That night, I dreamed of my mother's voice calling my real name. I woke up sweating. Andrew. I hadn't heard that name spoken out loud in 2 decades. It felt like someone calling a ghost. I didn't reply to the letter. But I didn't throw it away either. Some truths can't be destroyed. They just wait. After that, my routines felt different. Less automatic. More fragile. The life I had built started to feel like a shell. Safe. Empty. At work, people praised me for being reliable. I wanted to laugh. Reliability requires roots. I had none. Every success felt borrowed. Every compliment felt misplaced. Because none of it belonged to Andrew. And Daniel wasn't real. One night, I sat in front of the mirror and tried to see myself honestly. Not the face. The identity. Who was I without a name, without a past, without a story that made sense? The answer scared me. I was just a man who ran. I hadn't disappeared to start over. I had disappeared to avoid ending something. Responsibility. The mistake I made all those years ago never stopped existing. I had just left it behind like an unpaid debt. And debts grow with time. The longer you ignore them, the heavier they become. Another letter arrived months later. This one was simpler. We still miss you. No guilt. No anger. Just loss. I started drinking more. Not to forget. To soften the truth. Alcohol makes silence feel less loud. But it doesn't make it disappear. The weight inside me kept growing. Not with fear. With awareness. I wasn't afraid of being caught. I was afraid of dying as someone who never existed. A man without a real name. Without real connections. Without a story that belonged to him. I began to understand something uncomfortable. Running doesn't create a new identity. It dissolves the old one. And when the old one disappears, nothing meaningful replaces it. Just emptiness. I didn't need a new name, I needed my old courage. But courage requires facing what you left behind. And I had left behind everything that made me real. My family. My mistakes. My responsibility. My truth. I wasn't living under someone else's name. I was hiding from my own. And the longer I hid, the harder it became to remember who Andrew really was. Not the man who failed. The man who could still choose differently. The question wasn't whether I could return. The question was whether I deserved to exist honestly again. And for the first time in 20 years, I wanted to find out. The decision to stop being Daniel didn't come with a plan. It came with a quiet exhaustion. 20 years of pretending had worn me down in a way no physical labor ever could. Not because lying is hard, but because living without truth slowly erases you from the inside. I didn't wake up one morning feeling brave. I woke up feeling empty. And emptiness, when it lasts long enough, becomes louder than fear. I took the old letter out of the drawer again. The one with my real name on it. Andrew. A name that felt unfamiliar, like a language I used to speak but had forgotten. My mother was still alive. That fact alone felt heavier than all the lies I had told. I bought a ticket back to my hometown without telling anyone. No explanations. No goodbyes. Just a quiet departure from a life that never really belonged to me. On the train, I stared out the window and tried to imagine what it would feel like to exist honestly again. Not forgiven. Not understood. Just real. The town looked smaller than I remembered. Fewer shops. Older buildings. Familiar streets that felt like memories instead of places. My childhood home still stood at the end of the street. So did the fear. I stood across the road for a long time before walking up to the door. My hand trembled when I knocked. Not because I was afraid of what I would hear. Because I was afraid of what I deserved to hear. The door opened. My mother looked older. Thinner. But her eyes were the same. She didn't ask my name. She didn't ask where I had been. She just said, "Andrew." Hearing my real name out loud felt like stepping into sunlight after years underground. We didn't hug immediately. We just stood there, letting reality settle into the space between us. Inside the house, everything felt frozen in time. The same pictures. The same furniture. The same quiet atmosphere that had once felt normal. Now it felt sacred. "I thought you were dead," she said softly. "I wasn't," I replied. "I just disappeared." There was no anger in her voice. Only relief. We talked for hours. Not about details. Not about the mistake. Just about life. About the years we had lost. Some things can't be explained. They can only be acknowledged. My father had passed away years ago. He had died believing I had abandoned them without reason. That truth cut deeper than any legal consequence ever could. Running doesn't just erase your problems. It erases your place in other people's lives. I stayed in my hometown for a week. Walking familiar streets. Visiting old places. Letting Andrew exist again, even if only quietly. No one demanded answers. No one forced forgiveness. They just accepted that I was there. And that was enough. When I returned to my city, the apartment felt different. Not empty. Foreign. Daniel's life no longer felt safe. It felt false. I didn't report myself. I didn't confess to the past mistake publicly. The statute of limitations had passed. The world had moved on. But I hadn't. Some truths don't need legal consequences. They need personal ones. I changed my name back. Not because it was easy. Because it was necessary. Explaining it to co-workers, neighbors, acquaintances was uncomfortable. I was living under another name, I told them. Most people didn't ask why. They don't really want the truth. They just want the story to make sense. What mattered wasn't their understanding. It was mine. Living as Andrew again didn't magically fix my life. It made it honest. And honesty is heavier than comfort. Some friendships faded. Some routines broke. Some days felt lonelier than before. But for the first time in 20 years, my reflection felt familiar. I started calling my mother regularly. Not with guilt. With presence. I visited my father's grave and spoke to him quietly, knowing he would never hear me. Some apologies are for the person who says them. Not the one who receives them. I stopped avoiding questions about my past. I didn't overshare. I didn't hide. I just existed as myself. Not heroic. Not redeemed. Just real. The strangest part was how small my life became. No drama. No secrets. No double identity. Just simple days with simple truths. And simplicity felt like freedom. I realized something important. I didn't steal another man's name to survive. I stole it to avoid facing my own. But survival without identity is just slow disappearance. For 20 years, I wasn't living. I was postponing myself. Now, I wasn't trying to become a better man. I was just trying to be a real one. Not someone who ran from mistakes. Someone who carried them. Not someone who erased his past. Someone who owned it. The truth didn't save me. It didn't fix what I broke. It didn't give me back the years I lost. But it gave me something more valuable. A place in my own life. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve applause. I only wanted to stop being invisible to myself. And sometimes, that's the most difficult escape of all. Not from the world. But from the lies you tell yourself.